Hello, and welcome to Tartan Touchdown, Scotland's voice in conversation with the world of American football. I'm Gavin Sarah, I'm joined by my co-host Sarah, and for today, episode 3, we're in conversation with Markus Thomas, former Philadelphia Eagle and World Bowl winner with the Scottish Claymores, the UK's last professional American football franchise, and Markus also hosts his own podcast, the Pro Fan Talk. Markus, thanks so much for joining us this evening. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for having me. Anytime I get a chance to relive some World Bowl memories and some Scottish Claymore memories, I'm all for it, man. Let's get it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for making the time for us. And join me from the Tartan trio. We've got Sarah as well. Sarah, how are things?
Yeah, good. I'm interested to know, Marcus, if your accent might change after talking to us. You know, some Scottishisms might come out, which is always the fun part. So I'll keep a note of them, and then I'll let you know at the end of this how you did.
you might get a couple cheers from me. I haven't said cheers in a while, so
couple cheers, couple of like little wee things, you know, those kind of things is all good with us. But yeah, I'm doing really good. And Gav, really excited to be here with you both.
Awesome. Thanks so much for you can give your intros. So for those of you joining us for the first time at Tartan Touchdown, we love to explore the journeys of our guests in the world of American football, the highs, the lows, and the challenges experienced along the way. So we're very much looking forward to being in conversation with Markus this evening. So Markus, I guess just kind of starting from the beginning, obviously you grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. Just, I guess, tell us about your first influences and really getting into sport at a young age. What was that like for you?
Started playing baseball when I was 5. When I was in Cincinnati, you know, my dad was my first coach, and so even as a young kid, I could hit the ball a country mile. So I remember my dad getting into arguments with other coaches because they thought I was too old to be on the team I was on because I could hit the ball so far. So baseball was my first love from being born till I was like 6, 7 years old, and then we ended up moving to we moved to Cleveland for like 8 months, and then we ended up moving to St. Louis. And St. Louis was kind of where my athletic career really started. That's when I started playing football, still played baseball. My dad got us involved in track, me and my 2 sisters. I have a twin sister and an older sister. So we were always involved. Not ashamed to tell anybody that my sisters are better athletes than me, you know. We're all state title winners in high school. My sister was a track star. My twin sister was a basketball star, and I was a football star, and we all won state titles. So always had that that competition in the family. But my older sister, she's the one that set it up. You know, growing up, watching her, watched her when she went to college. I remember my dad, one of my core memories, my sister went to Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. I know Des Moines, Iowa's the big thing now because of Caitlin Clark, but back then you had the Drake Relays, which is a really big, Drake Relays was in the Midwest, and then you had the Penn Relays East. But Drake Relays, my sister was running. My dad rented an RV and let me and my twin sister invite one of our friends, and we drove from Cincinnati, Ohio to Des Moines, Iowa. And we stayed in Iowa for a week and watched, you know, my big sister running the relays. And we had a whole experience. And I remember after that trip, my dad never had to even mention about us going to college, me and my twin. Because like after that experience, we were like, oh, that's what we're doing. I want that. So like that whole experience was just big, you know, a college entrance exam, and being exposed to that environment and the fun that we had and seeing all the athletes and all of that type of stuff, man. I just remember that. And that was the thing that was like, oh, I am going to college, period. You don't have to convince me. You don't have to push me. This is what we're going to do. And then my going into high school, my baseball skills kind of evened out, but my football skills kept going up. And we ended up being the state title. We won a state championship in 1987, and we ended up at one point we were the 12th best team in the country, and then we lost, but we ended up winning the state title. And at the end of the year, USA Today had us as like the 24th or the 25th best team in the nation. And then I get recruited. I was telling you guys earlier, I didn't get a lot of recruits. I got sick after our state title, so I missed all the big recruits coming in. In the States, you can't talk to recruits until after your season is done in high school. At the time, anyways, I don't know if the rules are still the same. And then after we won the state title, I got sick, caught mono, and that's when all the big scouts came in, and I missed everybody. So one of my former teammates, Mark Mitchell, rest in peace, saw me in the weight room and asked me had I signed with anybody, and I told him no. And he said, "Why don't you roll with me down to Eastern Kentucky?" And I did that, and he introduced me to Coach Roy Kidd, and Coach Kidd told me that they did not recruit me because they didn't think they could get me, but they wanted to offer me a scholarship. And I ended up signing with Eastern Kentucky, broke every rushing record at Eastern Kentucky and in 1AA history, and made a career out of it. Ended up with the Eagles. Then by the Eagles, came through the Claymores. From Claymores, went to the Ticats. And the rest is history, man.
A
lot of stuff
sum
going
that
on.
up. Yeah. Really
Yeah, that's it, everybody.
rich
Thanks so much.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, and fortunately, we've got the time to do it. And I guess one thing I maybe just want to ask about is obviously you mentioned that you started in football at the age of 10, which I guess in the States is relatively late compared to some of your peers. So, what kind of influenced you to make that switch? Were you playing both at the same time, and one just you kind of developed more in football, or were you actually purely focusing on the baseball side of things?
Yeah, I was good at baseball, like really good. But when I got to high school, my natural talent kind of peaked. And when you get to that point, usually there is a coach somewhere around that can take you to the next level, because your body's only going to do so much naturally. Then you got to get somebody to teach you techniques and different things of that nature. Us being at a football school, my baseball coach was our defensive line coach. So football was always paramount where we were in Cincinnati. And like I told you the story, I played against Ken Griffey Jr. My first time seeing pro scouts was at a baseball game, stuff like that. But that natural talent just stopped. And then football just kept going. Our football team, when I got there my freshman year in high school, our football team, to your point, they had been playing together since like Little League. These kids, they were in the neighborhoods, all in the school district. So all of those guys have been playing together since they were like 5, 6 years old. And I was the transplant. So I felt out of place. I was a nose guard my freshman year in high school. I was just playing because I wanted to play a sport. And I wasn't afraid to hit people. I wasn't afraid to get dirty and stuff like that. And then when you go to your sophomore year, it's a big deal because the head coach at the high school is going to ask you, well, what do you want to play? What do you want to do? Then you got to move up and tell him what you want to do. And he looked at me like I had two heads when I told him I wanted to be a running back. So I made the move, and I ended up playing a lot my sophomore year. Had no moves. I didn't know what it meant to be a running back yet. I was a hard worker. I would run hard. I would block hard, and that's pretty much it. If I got the ball in my hands, I was trying to run you over. I wasn't trying to run around you. I would just lower my shoulder and just straight ahead because I didn't have any moves. But later on, I developed. By the time my senior year, the biggest thing you can get as a young athlete is confidence. And finally started getting my confidence. Our team was winning. We were one of the best teams in the country at the time. And we ended up winning our state title. And it was on a play that me and my quarterback, one of my best friends in college, we ran an option play and ended up scoring the winning touchdown to win the state title. We ended up winning that game 10-7.
Wow.
Or was it 10-7 or 14-10? I can't remember. It was a close game. It was cold. But I had like a 60-yard touchdown to win the game. So the skills developed late, but that transitioned into a scholarship down to Eastern Kentucky. And then when I got there, man, when I got my opportunity to get on the field, I never came off.
It's incredible. And just thinking about that choice of position, you said you wanted to be a running back. You were absolutely set in your mind that's what you wanted to be. Were there, I guess, were there players growing up in the 80s that I guess you aspired to emulate?
I mean, as a kid, I used to watch everybody. You know, I'm a child of the 70s, but kind of you grew up in the 80s, right? So I was watching Dr. J. I was watching Tony Dorsett. You know, I tell people, like, yeah, I hate the Cowboys because from my time with the Eagles, but I used to love Tony Dorsett because back at that time, the Cowboys were the good guys and the Steelers were the bad guys. You know what I mean? So, but I remember my sophomore year, going into my sophomore year, our coach had us together as a team and he showed us the old NFL films, not the documentary, but the like sizzle reel. And it had Gale Sayers on there. And that's when Gale Sayers has the famous line where he says, "All I need is 18 inches and I'll do the rest. Just give me 18 inches of daylight and I'll do the rest." And I remember seeing that and I was like, that's what I want to do. And that is why when I was in high school, when I was in college, when I was with the Claymores, that's why I wore number 40 for Gale Sayers. Even though he played way before me, I never saw him play. He was done playing before I started playing football. But I saw that tape and I was like, that's what I want to be like. And my style was off of his. I was a slashing type runner. I just modeled everything from him, and it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess maybe moving on to college. So obviously you mentioned the recruitment process for going to Eastern Kentucky. I guess that was you had the scouts came to your school when you actually caught mono, I believe. So you got that call. You kind of got that call a little bit down the line. Just tell us about what that recruiting experience was like for you.
Right. So like I said, like at the time, high school students could not talk to college scouts until their season was over. And we were in the playoffs and we went to the ultimate ending. We won the state title. That's an additional 4 weeks. So after our state game, that next week in school, that Monday, I get sick. I catch mono. I damn near collapse walking up the steps to class. And my mom came to pick me up and I was out for the rest of the week. And I had a desire to go to either Arizona State or to Michigan State. And lo and behold, I find out later that while I was out sick, George Perlis, who was the coach at Michigan State at the time, had come in to recruit another one of my teammates. And that would have at least been my opportunity to talk to him. But it didn't work out. And I was in our team's weight room at the high school. And that was like, if you played at our high school, even when you went to college, when you came back home, you kind of found yourself back at the high school, working out in the weight room because that was the place to go. We had a pretty decent sized weight room. And I saw one of my former teammates. I believe he graduated my sophomore year in high school. He went to Eastern Kentucky. And at the time, I hadn't signed with anybody yet. And he asked me, he said, "Hey, why don't you come down and let me introduce you to Coach Kidd?" So he drove me down there. Mark Mitchell, rest in peace. He drove me down to Eastern Kentucky. I met Coach Kidd, and he offered me a scholarship. Now, I'm thinking, okay, I got a shot. And then I realize everybody down there is either from Georgia or Florida. And I'm like, I already know they got like some really good athletes from Georgia and Florida. And you're talking about guys that, for whatever reason, they were supposed to go to Georgia. They were supposed to go to Florida State. They were supposed to go to Florida, but something didn't work out. Grades weren't good, whatever the situation was. So he's getting those athletes. So these are guys that are good enough to play at those big D1 schools that just didn't work out that way. And they're all at Eastern Kentucky. So I'm this kid nobody's heard of out of Cincinnati. And then when our starting running back gets hurt, I step in and everybody's like, okay, what are they going to do at running back? Who's going to pick up the slack? And when I stepped on the field, I never stepped off. everything just went up. Kept getting better, kept working, and nobody could stop me. And I ended up, I think, as a career in college, I averaged like 6.7 yards a carry for my career. So I tell anybody, like, hey, man, I could tote the rock. I could do what I had to do. But nobody expected it from me. You know what I mean? It was too many other big fish in the pond. So, you just wait. I just waited for my opportunity and made the most of it, man.
Yeah, and I guess there's a couple of different themes coming through that I guess really resonate from many of the others that we've spoken to, just in terms of their own journey. One of those is, I guess, just that resilience, obviously being able to, I guess, deal with setbacks and missing the scouting days, but actually still making sure. You mentioned you're in the weight room. You've always got to be ready because you never know when that phone's going to ring, when you're going to get that next opportunity. Right. I think really interesting.
It's something that you don't see as much now because we're in the social media era and everybody wants stuff quick. Everybody thinks, being an athlete and having success is like making pancakes. Like you can just add water and stir. They're like, nah, it's a lot of work to it. And it's a lot of, I think this era and this generation of kids playing and athletes, they don't understand failure. They don't understand what it means to lose. And they don't understand the lessons in loss. My first year I ever played football, we didn't win the game. We were 0-1-5 the first time I played football. So from an early age, I understood what it meant to lose. I was just having fun, but I understand that experience. And then when I was in high school, when I was telling you about the guys that had been playing together since they were like 4 or 5 years old, that group of guys never lost. And I'll never forget my freshman year, we lost the game. And all of these guys that were all tough and, we've been together, these guys were crying after a loss. And I'm looking at them like, what's wrong with y'all? Like, you've never experienced this before? And they hadn't. These guys had constantly won championships. And, I know it's Little League, but a win is a win. And that feeling is irreplaceable. So you remember it and you think it's easy to attain, especially when you have so much success as a kid. And then you come up against some trouble or some heartache or some opposition. And a lot of people don't know how to handle it because they ain't never been there. And this generation of athletes is kind of like that because they're doing everything to be on TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that. And it's like, it takes a little bit more work than that. And you don't understand what it means to lose and what you take from a loss. A loss is not always a bad thing. A lot of times for a lot of people, you don't experience growth until you lose something. So I just think in this generation, a lot of kids have lost out on those type of experiences because you got the new NIL deals and all of the AAU ball, and now it's okay to divvy out money and stuff like that to these athletes. They deserve it. All of this stuff with the NIL, it's all the NCAA's fault. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it's a balance that you have that a lot of these kids are losing that lesson. And they just but they're growing up in the era of, if I don't like what's going on here, I'm going somewhere else. But they haven't learned anything. There's a reason why you are where you are. So I guess the lesson of you made your bed, you better lay in it. That's lost on this generation.
Yeah, I totally. I mean, and you're speaking to people who are aware of losses and then coming through for their own personal NFL teams. But just to come back to something you said earlier, Marcus, when you were talking about when you arrive at Eastern Kentucky University, when you get driven down there to be like, hey, just come down, we'll get you set up. What did that day look like in terms of how did it all come about to be like, yeah, okay, we're going to pull you in, we're going to give you a full scholarship? Because that just seems a total fluke of chance, and I just would love to know what that day looked like when you arrived at the door at Eastern Kentucky.
You were 100% right. It was, as far as I can see it was just I was in the right place at the right time. My high school, I went to an awesome high school. I went to Princeton High School in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'll tell everybody, put your hand over your heart every time you say it. But we were one of those high schools where we loved our teachers, we loved our coaches, and even when you went away to college, that was like a destination. As soon as I come home for holiday break or whatever, I'm going to the high school so I can say what's up to this teacher, that teacher, the coach, because we grew up with that. We grew up with that. Those people around us letting us know that they cared for us, and it was a big thing to go back and see those teachers to give them a hug because they were genuinely interested in. So, and I'm saying all that to say, everybody on top of that, we had a really good, really nice gym in 1984 and through 88. We had really good facilities. So everybody would come home and work out. And I was in there working out, and a guy named Mark Mitchell came in there, and I knew Mark. He was in there lifting weights, and he just asked me kind of on a hum. He was like, "Did you sign with anybody yet?" And I was like, "Yeah, I went up to Toledo, went down to Indiana State. I didn't like what Toledo offered as far as what I wanted to study, so it looks like I might end up in Indiana State." And he was like, "Well, why don't you roll down with me to Richmond to meet Coach Kidd at Eastern Kentucky before you make a decision?" He said, "I'm going back down there this weekend. Why don't you roll with me?" So I did. Told my parents I'm gonna ride down with Mark. He drove me down there. It was about, I don't know, almost a 2-hour drive, not even that much. I met Coach Kidd. He told me that they wanted to recruit me, but they didn't think that they could get me. I didn't understand that because I didn't think I was that good. I thought I was good, but I didn't think I was like that great. You know what I mean? So again, that confidence thing I was telling you about. But he said, "We want to offer you a scholarship." And literally, I was like, huh? Like, I didn't know how to respond to it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, is this how this works? Like, I'm thinking in my head, like, there's got to be more to this. But it was very simple. He was like, he didn't mince any words. He was like, "We like you. We just didn't think we could get you. So we didn't recruit you." But basically, he was like, "You're here and we want to offer you a scholarship." And I had to ask him, I'm like, "Is this a full scholarship? Is this?" And he was like, "Yeah." So I accepted on the spot. And mind you, he showed me around the facility. Of course, they got, at the time, the last time they won a national championship, I believe, was 1982. Now, mind you, this is 1988. So it's still close enough where I can say, hey, they did that not too long ago. And that mattered. And he showed me all the conference champions and stuff like that. So clearly they had a reputation and a standard of winning at Eastern Kentucky. And Coach Kidd was a coach who was known, he was pretty popular. So I went down there and made some things happen. And it was one of the best decisions I could have ever made. But it was, to your point, it was very nonchalant. If I would have stayed somewhere for another certain amount of time and not made it to the weight room, that trip never would have happened. So big shout out to Mark Mitchell. I miss him dearly. He's my fraternity brother. And fun fact, his daughter is Kelsey Mitchell, who plays in the WNBA with Caitlin Clark at the Indiana Fever. That is his daughter. So greatness is all around, man.
Take advantage of these opportunities, and as you say, I think it really did lead to a fantastic career. I mean, I think you held for a long time. I think you've said it was recently broken. You had the school's rushing record. I think it was 5,500 rushing yards and 54 touchdowns, and actually you were inducted into the Hall of Fame at Eastern Kentucky in 2008. So I guess what did that mean for you, getting to go back and have that acknowledgement?
That was phenomenal because, of course, my sisters got a chance to come and experience that with me. My wife was down there with me. She had never seen me play football or anything. I met her after that. My grandson had a chance to come down there with me. That was cool because he got a chance to see where I went to school and all of that type of stuff. So just having family around and just being up here where I am in South New Jersey, right across from Philly, I don't get a chance to go home often. So to be able to have that opportunity, and my wife and other people in my family to experience with me. My godparents were down there. Some of my cousins came down there. So it was just to be around family and to be at your alma mater, which is like a second home. Seeing coaches you hadn't seen in a while, and everybody showing love to you and stuff like that. Man, it was an awesome experience.
That's absolutely fantastic. And I guess, after such a strong career in college, you obviously then went on to into the NFL draft. And obviously at that time you didn't get picked up through the draft. But tell me, I guess, about that experience going through that, and I guess waiting for your name to be called. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I thought I at least had a shot. But the reality was I didn't have a very good combine. Let me say it like this. I didn't run a very good 40 time at the combine. I had a pretty good combine for a running back. I just never had a sorry about that. I didn't run a good 40 time. I think I ran like a 4.74 at the combine.
Yep.
And as a running back, that's not great. Now, when I had my pro day at Eastern, I ended up running a 4.48. But I think that 40 time at the combine haunted me a little bit. But the second day, I got a call from the Seahawks. I had gone home. I wasn't at school. I had gone home. And the Seahawks called me. They were signing some guys at Ohio State. And they told me that they were going to come down to the University of Cincinnati. They wanted me to meet them down there. And they were going to sign me and a couple other guys in the area to the Seahawks. Then they called me back about 40 minutes later and said they were going to go in a different direction. Good luck to you. And I had to pick my face up off the floor. And then about a half hour later, the Eagles called me and said, hey, we want to bring you in and sign you to a rookie contract. And we're going to sign you as a free agent. And I ended up going to Philly and making a squad with the Eagles.
It's just, sounds like such a roller coaster of a day to think you're going to one place to find out that you're not. And then before you've time to even process that, you then get that news to say, actually, you're going to the East Coast instead, to Philly. Yeah,
it was. I had wanted to go to Philly because I had the opportunity. I ran track my senior year in college, and we had a chance to go to the Penn Relays, and I fell in love with it. That was my first time in Philly. I was like, I love this vibe. I love the city, walking down Broad Street and all of that type of stuff. So I was happy to end up in Philly. And plus, it wasn't, too long ago. Randall Cunningham was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, all of that type of stuff. Herschel Walker was in Philly at the time. So there was a lot of stuff going on athletically in Philadelphia. So I ended up dealing with that, being in there. Me and another guy, it was another running back from Virginia Tech named Vaughn Hebron. We were both free agents at running back at the same position, and we both made the team. That never happens. Never. And we both made the team. Another fun fact for you. I took the spot of Saran Stacy.
Wow.
On that team. Right. Yeah, so it was Saran Stacy and Tony Brooks from Notre Dame. And they ended up cutting Saran Stacy, and they ended up Tony Brooks was hurt, so they couldn't cut him. But the fact that two free agent running backs made the team at the same position was crazy.
Yeah, and I guess just maybe for context, for I guess younger listeners, we should maybe explain Saran Stacy would go on to become your teammate, and I guess one of the most iconic members of the Scottish Claymores team that you play with. So it's funny just how that all works out. But I do want to, I guess, talk a bit before we move on to Claymores, to talk about that time in Philadelphia. Just, I guess, talks about that experience. Obviously, you've worked for so long, you've made it into the NFL. So that 93 season, you're surrounded by the likes of Randall Cunningham and Herschel Walker. Yeah. What was that like for you as an experience?
That was crazy. But I couldn't have been around a better group of like veteran NFL players. if you know anything about Randall Cunningham, he's a very, very humble dude. He's had some tragedy in his recent past with, his child dying and things of that nature. But at the time, he was bigger than life. He was the guy I had that moment. My first day at camp, at true training camp, not rookie camp, but training camp. I'm nervous as hell. Can't eat in the morning, trying to figure out something that I can keep down because I'm that nervous. So I get down to the field super early because I just got nervous energy. And I'm out on the field stretching, and who's the first guy out there is Randall Cunningham. So he was like, "Come on, Rook, let's warm up." And I'm like, you talking to me? And my first day of practice, I'm tossing the ball with Randall Cunningham. And I'm having that moment, and I'm like, this is the guy that I played on Madden. This is the guy that I saw on Sports Illustrated and the ESPN highlights and all of that type of stuff. I'm standing talking to this dude like we've been friends forever. And you have to go through that mental, it's just a mental moment where you understand that your heroes and you are now at the same level.
Yeah.
So it is a very mental adjustment. It's a psychological adjustment that a lot of guys can't make. When you get there, and then you got to get comfortable with, yes, this is the guy that's on Madden. This is the guy that's been on the cover. This is the guy I saw on TV last week. And now we are teammates. We are at the same level. I can talk to him like a friend, and he'll talk back to me. So just getting over that hump. And then, the biggest thing I try to tell people with if you ever get the opportunity to reach that level, the 100 yards that you play in the NFL is the same 100 yards that you played in high school and Little League. The distance doesn't change. The things that you learn don't change. You got to learn how to turn off the outside noise and concentrate on what you're supposed to do. That is the hardest thing to do, because everybody gets caught up in the glitz and the glam and autographs and everything that comes with that. Hey, can you come over here and sign autographs? Here, come down and tell everybody you ate at my restaurant and we'll give you free dinners and like all of the perks that come with it. It's very enticing and very hard to ignore and very easy to get you out of your routine. That is the hardest thing in making the transition to the pro game. Leaving all of the stuff, the outside stuff, the stuff that you want people to see, leaving that alone and concentrating on what you're supposed to do. That's the hardest thing.
And I guess you just kind of mentioned people like Randall Cunningham. That's, I guess, really by the time they're really in the peak of their career as well. So they have those lessons to be able to impart and wrap around you. And I guess thinking about it, what was your sort of experience from the coaching perspective? Obviously you mentioned the players. What did you get from the coaching team in Philly?
See, it was the first year. We started out with Kaharick, remember, in '95. He got fired.
In Philadelphia, sorry.
Oh, in Philly. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the Claymores.
Okay. Sorry.
In Philly, I played for Rich Kotite. Now he wasn't considered a very good coach. We have a joke. It's like, I tell somebody like, yeah, I used to play for the Eagles, but I played for Kotite, so keep that quiet. He just didn't do a very good job with the Eagles. My rookie year, Randall Cunningham tore his knee, so we were going to make the playoffs. We were 8-1. Then he got hurt, and then we ended up like 8-8 for the season. We lost the last couple games, so we didn't have the best coaches. We had phenomenal defensive coaches. Just the offensive side of the game just wasn't quite there. But I remember specifically that year in '93, we had a lot of injuries. Randall Cunningham got hurt. Byron Evans, a linebacker, got hurt. Seth Joyner was hurt. We had a lot of starters that were injured. And I remember walking into Kotite's office and saying, like, look, coach, we got a lot of our veterans and starters playing special teams because we got so many injuries. I'm a rookie. I'm not doing nothing. Let me play special teams. Let me run down on kickoff, make a tackle. I was just like, let me just get in there and get some tape down and give some of these vets a break. And he didn't want to do it. He did not want to do it. He did not. He was like, "You're doing good, kid. We got you where you are, and just keep doing what you're doing, keep working, and we'll find a spot for you." And I'm like, well, whatever. But that, like, for me, that was a big moment because I was nervous going in his office. Like, coach, you need to be playing me. And you know what I mean? So, and for him to kind of push me to the side, I was like, ugh. And just you learn that sometimes that's just the way that it works. And I know now that wasn't because of me, whether or not I had the talent to do it or not. That had everything to do with the money that they were going to pay me. We had a notoriously cheap owner. I got my first year was Norman Brayman was the owner of the team, and he was notoriously cheap. Then my second year is when Jeffrey Lurie, the current owner, bought the team, and it was night and day. So I understand that this is what they would do. Now, I was on the active roster. I was not on a practice squad. I was on the active roster. I would travel to all the games. And at the time, the running backs were me, Vaughn Hebron, Herschel Walker, Heath Sherman, and James Joseph. It was 5 of us. They would travel me to every game. And then 15 minutes before kickoff, they would make me inactive. So I would be one of those guys on the sidelines with the medallions and street clothes, with the security pass. And I would go out there, and it was the same thing all year. They would travel me. I would get out there, get dressed, warm up, because Heath Sherman was hurt. And then 15 minutes before kickoff, they would say, okay, go put your clothes on. We're going to make you inactive. And they did that the whole year. But if they would have made me active, and if I would have played a certain percentage of plays, I would have got a big signing bonus and stuff like that. So it was all financial and all that kind of stuff. They didn't care about who was the better players or we need to give our vets a break or something like that. At that time, they just weren't thinking about that. And I was just a casualty of it. But that's the nature of the beast. That's the business of it. That's the ugly side.
And I guess you mentioned obviously the change of ownership. So what was the I guess the change of mood going into that second year at the Eagles?
Here's how cheap it was my first year. If you wanted an extra pair of socks, you had to pay for them. If you wanted an extra pair of shoes, they would make you pay for them. When they cut me, I tried to get my helmet. They didn't want to give me the helmet. Like they didn't have enough helmets. Like stuff like that. It was silly because I remember having conversations with other players that we had just signed that, from San Francisco, from New York, and I played with Mark Bavaro and some famous Giants. And even then, they could tell it was like, what are y'all doing down here? This is not how it's supposed to run. And then you go to when Jeffrey Lurie bought the team. I'll never forget this. In '94, after a preseason game, and I had a decent preseason game. I didn't do nothing extraordinary. But I remember coming in the locker room. Jeffrey Lurie was standing in the locker room, and he shook everybody's hand. And I remember he looked me in my eye and said, "Great job today, Marcus. Great job." There was no reason why he should have known who I was, but he did. And that just showed me that he put a lot into what he just put his money into. And he wanted to show everybody that he was part of this team and he wanted to make a difference. And from that moment, I've always respected Jeffrey Lurie. And I've seen him plenty other times at the alumni events. We've got pictures together and stuff like that. But I always remember that moment because there's just that little measure of respect goes a long way. And a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting to see that, just how you see that immediate step change. Because I mean, certainly in terms of the management, obviously the general manager, Howie Roseman's been there for 25 years. He's probably one of the most respected GMs in the entire league. It's the real change of culture, starting with the ownership.
Yeah, I met Howie. Howie wasn't there when I played, but seeing where he came from and what he had to go through, specifically when Chip Kelly and that whole situation started, and he got demoted and put in the office in the corner. But credit to Howie, he knew what he wanted to do, and he knew like I was mentioning earlier, he knew he had to take that L. He had to take that loss when Chip Kelly was there. And now, because he didn't leave, because he wanted to stay with the organization, he is without question the best GM in the NFL right now. But that doesn't happen if he doesn't take his lumps the way that it worked out. Yes, it was wrong, but he's better for it because nobody's giving a damn about Chip Kelly anymore. But Howie Roseman's got a Super Bowl ring, and it looks like we're in a good chance to get another one. So, like I was talking earlier about being able to take your lumps and come through when you lose, you learn something with loss. And I think Howie's done that, and it's paid dividends for the organization.
Thanks very much, Marcus. So I guess moving on then, so we obviously we talked about your time in America, but of course one of the main reasons that connects us is your time in Scotland. So let's just talk a little bit about, I guess, for maybe people who are less familiar with it, 1991, originally we had the World League of American Football, and that was a project that actually spanned both sides of the Atlantic. There was teams in the US, they had a handful of teams in Europe, did very well. I think like the first ever World Bowl had 60,000 fans at Wembley Stadium, but kind of tailed off a bit in the second year, took a hiatus for a couple of years, 93, 94. But then they decided to relaunch it in 1995 as a purely European project. So when I guess did the opportunity to come and play in Europe first appear in your radar?
When I got cut in 94, that next summer, anybody that's, been in that situation, you know how the business goes. You call your agent. They call teams. Hey, we know you're available. You understand the lingo because everybody says the same thing. Hey, we know you're available. Stay ready. We'll call you if we want you. That sort of thing. So I'm lifting weights. I'm in the weight room. I'm in shape. That whole thing. And then actually, Bobby Hammond. I don't know if you remember that name. Bobby Hammond was the coach for the London Monarchs when the World League was brought back. Bobby Hammond was a special teams coach with the Eagles. So I was like, okay, now there's somebody that knows me. So that generated interest just from that standpoint. Now, I didn't end up playing for London, but you think at that point, you think you know somebody, so you think you got it in. You know what I mean? Yep. It might not be the case, but that's just your head playing with you. But at the end of the day, I did what I had to do. You submit your name for the draft, all of that. They had all of the players and stuff like that. And I ended up getting picked for the Claymores. And at that particular point, you just want to play. That's it. You just want to play. You want another opportunity to play. And if you remember, in 95 and 96, remember when they had the allocated players? And it was a big deal if you had one of the NFL decals on the back of your helmet. That means you're on a team and they've allocated you to play over here. So that was a big deal. Remember, Sean LaChapelle and, he's with the Chiefs and Tim Harris, what was his name?
Tim
Barnett. Tim Barnett, he was a receiver. I played with his cousin, Fred. But you just wanted an opportunity for somebody to see you so you could go back into camp. That was the long and short of it. You get paid some good money to be over here for 3 months, for a 3-month vacation, right? But we get over there in 95. Doug Williams is one of our coaches. So now you got the Doug Williams thing, Super Bowl winner, that whole aura around. And then I don't know if you remember, our coach was Larry Kaharick.
Yeah, that's right.
He got fired. Yeah, it was. And what happened was, I don't know if he just didn't like Doug. But what ended up happening was they were having coaches meetings and not telling Doug Williams. And Doug Williams was like, "You're not going to treat me any old kind of way." Doug's from the South. Like he don't play that. So he left the team. He called I forget what his name is. He was the owner of this team at the time. can't remember what his name was. He was the owner of the team. He had called the owner of the team, told him the situation, and he walked out. And that's when they fired Kaharick. Because if you remember, we were still trying to get the promotions and get television deals and stuff like that. And Doug Williams' names was still a big draw.
Yep.
So when he walked away from it, that wasn't a good look. And I think that's why and then of course, what Kaharick did. I remember there was a big meeting about that. Like, do you want to continue to play for him? And because he had a very old school mentality. We were going hard in practice. But we were doing some things that people weren't comfortable with. Like, he wanted us to go live against linebackers and try cutting linebackers. It's like, dude, you don't cut your own teammates. You don't, not in practice, nothing like it. So it was a very, he was different. He was different. I remember, we went on a scrimmage. This is when we were in camp in Carrollton, Georgia, that first year in '95. We scrimmaged, I don't know who it was, and we beat the hell out of them. So we're happy. Kaharick's happy. So he decides he wants to stop at a liquor store on the way back to the hotel. And we're like, what? So he convinces the bus driver to pull over at this liquor store somewhere outside of Atlanta. He gets out, and he comes back in, and he's got like 3 or 4 cases of Old English 500 beer. And we're like, what? And he literally, this is what he says. He's like, yeah, I bought this because I heard this is what the brothers like. Like, what? Like, are you kidding me? Like, we didn't know whether to laugh or like, did he really just say that? Like, he was out there like that. So with some of this stuff, and that wasn't the only thing. It was a whole bunch of other stuff that happened, but the crux of it was when he was having those meetings without Doug. And then I remember we had a team meeting, and there was quite a few players that had played for him before that didn't want to fire him. They wanted to keep him, and but the majority of the people were like, ain't no way. Ain't no way. Because I think at that particular time, we didn't want to lose Doug Williams.
Yeah.
We didn't know Kaharick. We knew Doug Williams. So he had to be, if that's what has to happen to keep Doug Williams, then that's what we'll do. Because we were hoping that they would make Doug the head coach, but they ended up choosing Kreiner. I don't think Doug Williams wanted to be the head coach. And I think that's when they chose Kreiner. And then, Jim ended up staying for the rest of the time.
And obviously, Doug Williams, I mean, I guess a bit before my time as a fan, but obviously a real track record as a player in the NFL, 5 years with the Buccaneers, another 4 with Washington, at the time, Redskins. So, I mean, obviously that's someone that's going to command a lot of respect in a locker room, having played the game at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the winning the championship, first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl. There's a lot of aura with Doug Williams. And at that particular time, he was still regarded. I mean, he still is, but even going back 20 years, it's 20 years. It's longer than that, isn't it? But going back that far, he was very highly regarded. Still in NFL circles, and a lot of people were watching because Doug Williams was involved in it. So just being, very similar to what I was saying about Randall Cunningham, just being around Doug Williams and learning stuff from him, learning his some of the things, the stories that he told, and some of the stuff that he had to go through. Like, we wanted Doug there, and if Kaharick was the sacrifice, like, if you had to pick one or the other, yes, I'm picking Doug Williams. I don't know this guy. So it all worked out for the best. We ended up with Jim Kreiner. Doug stuck around, and then he did not come back the second year, but that ended up being the year we won the title.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess maybe just without kind of going into a deep dive, it was a tough year, that first year for the team. So it's the debut season, finishes 2-8. So I guess last in that league of 6, but with a lot of close games along the way. I think there was, I want to say 5 of those games, I think, were 3 points or less in terms of that margin of defeat. But obviously, you talked about that experience going all the way back to high school. how did you find that first season in terms of, I guess, going through that test?
Well, honestly, a lot of guys, like, we didn't know what to expect. This is like, again, we just wanted to play ball. Because I think a lot of guys were just looking at it strictly as a situation. It was like, I don't care about this. I just want to, I'm playing, I'm staying in shape, and hopefully I can get into somebody's camp when we get back home. That was basically the mindset. And then you add kind of losing on top of that. Then you add, did anybody really want to be in Scotland? We didn't know any better. Especially when you travel and you're going to Frankfurt, and then you're going to Amsterdam, and then you're going to Dusseldorf, and then you're going to Barcelona, and you see how they party in their cities and what the amenities were. It seemed like, Scotland was kind of on a struggle bus that first year. You know what I mean? So, but it was an experience, man. I tell people to this day, I learned more about, that was the most educational time in my life in Scotland and in Europe, traveling the world in Europe. Because what I tell people is, I understood, and I came to understand why people don't like Americans a lot. I understand where the stigma comes from. Like, a lot of times we go over there, and I remember there was a lot of guys that when we got to Scotland, a lot of people, a big transition is the food, and it's like, well, I don't like this. I like my eggs a certain way. And it's like, we're not in Texas. We're not in Philly. They don't do it that way. So you had to come to the adjustment. And what I figured out is how abrasive and rude some Americans can be. But also on the flip side of that, it was like, if you show people some compassion and just be nice and courteous, they will bend over backwards for it. And that was my experience. You're not trying to get nobody in trouble. That's the way I was raised. And I'm sure a lot of guys weren't trying to do it on purpose, but that's the way it came off. But I figured out very early, it's like, hey man, you treat people with respect, they will bend over backwards for you over here. They don't want no trouble. They just trying to do what they got to do as well. And I learned that, and you see that all throughout in Amsterdam, in Frankfurt, in Barcelona. Everybody's nice. You just got to be nice to them. But I understood why people have that stigma about Americans. And it's earned, to be quite honest with you. Because a lot of people are rude. A lot of people are loud. And it really made me take a step back, and I was like, okay, now I get it. And it's unnecessary. But I understand what people look at. So it really shifted my behavior. It really shifted the way I perceived everybody else and how I would act in other places. It really changed that. And that was the greatest education I got from all that time over in Europe.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know if it was the food or the football, but as obviously mentioned, you spent 3 years in Scotland total. So I guess going from 95 to 96, what sold you to come back and return with the team for another year?
Oh, it's the same thing. You just want to play. When I came back that first year, I ended up going to Carolina, and I ended up in camp in Jacksonville. That was Jacksonville's first year with Camp Coughlin. But looking at it strictly from a standpoint of, I was in shape, I was ready, I was in football shape, and you got the opportunity. It didn't work out, and then you rinse and repeat. And when the opportunity came back to go again, I was like, absolutely, I'll go again. And then that next year we go up to Glasgow, and same experience, but a little bit different because now we're in a new city. Staying at the train station, and then now my wife, she was up there with me. Just the one thing I remember about Glasgow, some of the best Chinese food I ever had in my life.
Wow.
There was a Chinese restaurant right across the street from the station, and it took me a while to wrap my hand around seeing an Asian man with a Scottish accent. Took me a minute to get that, but we used to go to all of those places. We used to, I mean, the Chinese food was awesome. There was a chicken tikka place right next to that. And that was like 2 and 3, 4 times a week. We would just go right across the street. And it was like, you just fall in love with stuff like that, man. Walk down the street to the, what was that? I believe it was like a TGI Fridays on the corner.
Yeah, not too far.
Yeah. So we
know exactly
like just that whole experience. Gosh, man, I remember to this day, every time I'm listening to music, if I hear Return of the Mac, I will stop what I'm doing, because I remember that was the #1 song in the UK, and when we went back home, it wasn't in the US yet, and I was like, "What do you mean you don't heard this song? This is on like every 5 minutes." Hadn't come over there. I remember, what was it? Oh, we had a kid on our team. He was a Japanese national player, and he had a pocket monster before it was called Pokemon.
Oh, is this the Tamagotchi? Is it?
Yeah, he had a Tamagotchi.
Tamagotchi.
So this just shows you I have the book, the story of 1996, and I think I want to see is it Nachi Abe possibly?
Yes, Nachi Abe, yeah, Abi, Abbi, I think it was. So he didn't speak much English at all, but we would see him on the bus playing with this little locket, and like, dude, what are you doing? And the only thing he could say is pet,
yep.
Virtual pet, which turned out to be Pocket Monster, which turned into Pokemon, Catch 'em all, and all that kind of stuff. And oh my God, man, my wife always reminds me McFlurries.
Oh, that's
we're not in the States yet.
Oh,
they weren't in the States
corners.
Yet. Yeah. So like different things like that, man. It just made the whole experience that much better. I got on the thing with every time I would either get an opportunity to go down to Princes Street or go to one of the football shops in Glasgow, or when we went through London Heathrow, I would always come back with a football jersey. So I had like Arsenal and Sheffield Wednesday, and I had Glasgow Rangers. I had about 12 or 15 jerseys, and I had about 4 or 5 goalie jerseys. The real big, bright, ugly ones. I used to love them things, man. So just like, I remember that, all of that type of stuff, that little stuff, just the interactions we had. And I remember I can't remember if this was Glasgow or Edinburgh, but there was an arcade close to the hotel, and that was the first time I had seen people on the big DDR machines and playing Virtua Fighter and all of that, because all of that stuff wasn't in the States yet. So we were seeing stuff 3-4 months before it came to the United States. So that was a crazy experience. But I remember all of that stuff, and I loved it, man. Absolutely loved it.
And maybe one question I'll just ask you, since you mentioned Nachi Abe, but obviously one of the, I guess, the special features of playing in the World League or NFL Europe, as it become, was the sort of the national players.
Yeah.
We're obviously an element of that. So you've Scots. I mean, obviously Scott Cooper being the main stand-up, with likes of Ben Torriero, being another, and then obviously '96 you actually had Gavin Hastings, who
we had Gavin.
retired from international rugby and did a season with the Claymores. So I guess, what was that like, playing with players from other countries as part of the team, and just seeing, I guess, all of their different experiences?
Yeah, it was kind of like being a freshman again, because you got to meet all new people. Like you were talking about, Nachi didn't speak English, but we had to figure out a way to communicate because he's our teammate. And then hanging with Ben, I remember when Ben showed up to practice, and I guess he had got a sponsored card. He had Claymore's written on the side of it. Just some of the stories with Scoops, with Scott Cooper, all the way until I talked to Scott a couple years ago, and I remember him telling me the story when he was with the Chicago Bears and how that worked out. But just just meeting everybody, and again, just being ingratiated with everybody in that culture. Them guys taking care of us, just having a good time. I remember trying to explain to people who Gavin Hastings was, and the only thing I could come up to is I was like, Gavin Hastings is like the Michael Jordan of rugby in Scotland, and they were like, oh, okay, I get it. It was like, yeah, he's that dude, and now he's kicking for us. And I mean, I know it was to bring people at the game, because I remember that first year, we got no applause until he came on the field to kick a field goal. Nobody could care about anything else. But when Gavin stepped on the pitch, it was standing room only. So it was, but that was part of the charm of it. That was part of growing in it, to go from worst to first and win the World Bowl, and host it, at Murray Field and all of that type of stuff. I remember being a tech geek even back then, and I was so into, I know at the time Murray Field was a relatively new stadium, and reading up on the history and all the cameras, and they could zoom in on any seat and all of that type of stuff. I was always into that stuff. I remember going down to that second year, they flew me down I took a train down to London, and they had me on, was it BBC Sports? And they did the whole thing on me on doing graphic design and stuff like that. And my time with the Claymores, and I remember I forget what the girl's name was. She actually had me draw on a Claymore's logo, and I was drawing blood on the sword and all kind of crazy stuff, man. But just that experience, man. I love that experience. The time we had to taking the train down to London, again, anytime we got a chance to go through London Heathrow, I was like, man, I might miss the plane back on purpose. Like, I want to live here. That airport was just crazy at the time. We had never seen anything like that.
So big. That's incredible.
Had a lot of fun though, man.
Yeah, it's awesome. And in terms of that season, so again, for people maybe not familiar with the World League, it had a bit of I guess, an interesting quirk, which was that it was the team who led the standings halfway through the season won the right to host. And actually, as much as one of the biggest things you'll be remembered for was scoring in the World Bowl against Frankfurt, you actually scored in a game during the regular season against Frankfurt to clinch that position. You went there and shut them out 20-0. Hot crowds in Germany. I think they would get 30, 40, even 50,000 for some of these games in Germany. So what was that like to go in and silence a crowd like that?
Germany, Frankfurt specifically. The first time we played in Frankfurt, everybody, to a man, was like, why the hell couldn't I get picked for this team? Because Frankfurt knew how to throw a party. I believe we were at the old Olympic Stadium. And again, me being a tech geek and into video games and stuff like that, I will always remember they were doing promotions and, giveaways and stuff with people in the stands. And they had a contest. They picked 2 people out of the stands, and they were playing Gran Turismo on the Jumbotron. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like, stuff like that, and then they had the beer garden. And after the game, we were all there and everybody's drinking and we're singing songs. And dude, it was just the best time. The best time. The football was there. At that particular time, our team was pretty galvanized, and we knew we were good. Saran was doing what he was doing. Yo Murphy had come out of nowhere, and we were getting it done, and we were all clicking on all cylinders. So it didn't surprise us. I think the undercurrent was they wanted Frankfurt to win that game, because then they could have hosted the game in Frankfurt. And it's like, nah, that ain't going to happen. And, we ended up putting it on them, man. And it's like, if the game would have been in Frankfurt, they probably would have sold out. But we ended up with, 30,000 at Murray Field that year for the game. And a lot of people traveled for that game, man. So that was awesome to see. And again, just the transition from worst to first. And people in Scotland not really understanding what they were watching, to the support we got the second year when we won the title. And I still got that picture holding that big round trophy, man. And anytime you win a championship, you win a championship. It is very difficult to do. I don't care who you play for, what league you're in. It is very difficult to do. So I'm always proud of that fact that we held it down for Scotland. I still got me a blue and white flag in the closet, and I'll bring it out every chance I get. I will tell people I'm an honorary Scotsman. Sarah, to your point, my accent is gone. My accent is gone, but I still remember it, and I still try to mess around with it and quickly realize, like, yeah, no, just leave that alone. But yeah, I'm still proud of that fact, man. Still proud of that fact.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that about people coming to understand the game, because I was at the World Bowl, so I think 95, I only really caught some of those games on television, but 96, I remember my dad actually got season tickets to the Claymores, and we'd been to a few games through the regular season, so we'd seen them play Barcelona and London, and I think Frankfurt as well, but the crowds, obviously it was a sport that Scotland was still kind of learning to embrace. You're getting maybe 10, 15,000 depending. Usually the weather had a big factor in who was there that day. But then to get to the World Bowl, and then it's a completely different kettle of fish. I think it was just shy of 40,000 people at Murrayfield Stadium. Again, speaking to the weather, you're in the middle of June, and they had a fantastic day for it. It was that kind of prime time, 6 p.m. kickoff as well. So it's an evening game. And I remember going there, and I would have been 10 or 11 at the time, and everything was just bigger that day. It felt like a real sense of occasion. And that was my first time. I hadn't really watched NFL from the States prior to that. So I was still very much learning the game. And with, you talk about the fanfare, it's not the Super Bowl, but it was the Super Bowl of the World League at the time. So you had the marching band from, I think it was University of Maryland were there. They had, big band playing the pre-game party. But the one thing that stood out to me is I remember that at Edinburgh Castle, they have the 1 o'clock gun. And I'm pretty sure they had that in the stadium to go off on the kickoff.
Nice.
So I'm down in the corner where they've got the gun. And Gavin Hastings kicks the ball off to Frankfurt, opening kickoff of the game. And I just remember the gun going off, and then all of a sudden, like 10 seconds later, we have a touchdown. Like, what has happened? And I think it's only when I get to see the highlights later that obviously you get the play broken down. It's like, oh, there's been a turnover, and I guess it's yourself that comes up with that ball in the end zone. So what you've got to tell us about that moment. What did that feel like to set the tone on such a big game in front of a big crowd? What are your memories of that?
I remember I was the gunner, so I was all the way on the right side. And I believe it was Mario Bailey. And I missed the tackle. I was coming over from the side, and he kind of slipped underneath me. So I tried to hit him from the side, and I just missed. And I got a hold like of his arm and his hip, and his momentum going the other way just basically just slung me around. And when I let go, I just kind of landed it at a spot where I popped right back up. And then that's when, was it Coghill? I think it was George Coghill that caused the fumble, and the ball bounced right to me. Like, as soon as I got up, the ball bounced right into my lap. And I just took off. I think I only had to run like 20 yards or something like that. And it was right there, man. I couldn't believe it. It was crazy.
Yeah, and that was, I guess that was just such a, I guess the perfect start for a game like that, when you've so many fans, whether they've travelled or even if they're just, they're local Scots, but they're coming there for the first time, and immediately you've got everyone energised. And I guess what turned out to be a really exciting back and forth game. It was 32-27 it finished. And just such an incredible day. And I guess, again, going through that theme of resilience and dealing with battles, that Sean LaChapelle, the main receiver who'd been such a big threat throughout the season, he'd gone down in that game. This is after the starting quarterback had gone down a couple of games prior. So you had Jim Ballard and Joe Murphy, and everyone just balled out. in the
Yeah,
end. It was
everybody had the
incredible
opportunity
day.
to shine, man. Yo Murphy was coming up. You had seen flashes of him during the season. Jim Ballard just was kind of sitting back there. I believe, who was that? Matthews that went down?
Is
And
Steve
then
Matthews, the
Steve
quarterback?
Matthews, yeah. And then Jim just came in and just lit it up, man. But what Yo Murphy, man, what he did that day was incredible. And one of those things where nobody saw it coming. We knew, but you never know when you're going to get your opportunity. The only thing you can do is be ready when it comes. And he was more than ready. And when you have situations like that and you got somebody that nobody watched film on Yo Murphy, they didn't know what to expect, and all he did was kept running past people and breaking tackles and getting in the end zone. And because of that, we ended up holding that trophy, man.
Yeah, it was just incredible day. And I guess it's one that you kind of mentioned earlier about kids getting used to winning.
Yeah.
That's my first season watching the team. I knew the story of what happened the year before, but you think, this is incredible. We're winning the big games. You get the trophy, and you start to learn a bit about American sports and I guess that concept of parity that you move on to year three for the Claymores and for yourself.
Yeah.
And it's obviously a new squad of players and maybe a slightly different experience. Again, I think the team finished 500 overall. So
yeah,
was it similar again, just keeping up that opportunity to play, or were you really just sold on the Scottish experience by 97?
Keeping. I knew I was going to play again. I wouldn't have wanted to go anywhere else. But my reasons, because I didn't know what was going to happen. I ended up leaving the team halfway through the year because it just wasn't. I didn't feel like I was trying to think what was my frame of mind so here's what it was. That year, if I remember correctly, nobody knew what happened to Saran after last year.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Hadn't heard from him, hadn't heard anything. So that season, I'm still going to camps, NFL camps. When I report to the Claymores that year, I am cranked. Like, I'm in the best shape of my life. I had bulked up to like 225 pounds. I was like 8% body fat. I was ripped. Like that time, me getting prepped, I was like, because in my head, I understand, like, I'm about to be 27. So my opportunities to play in the NFL I'm running out of time. I know how this business works. So I'm like, this is gonna be it for me. So I gotta put it down this year. And I was in the best shape of my life. I had a phenomenal camp. And I was ready to rock and roll. And then the last 2 days of camp, we found out that Saran was coming back. Nobody had heard from him. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what the situation was. So long story short, like, I had one of the best camps in my life. And when Saran came back, it was like I never did a thing. And I was like pissed. The first game of the year, we played Amsterdam. And my buddy, the one I was telling you about, Ron Carpenter, he was a safety, a defensive back for Amsterdam. And of course, we went to high school together, so we talk all the time. And after that game, I never forget, he came up to me and he was like, he said, homie, I said, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, what's wrong? He said, dude, what happened? He said, we've been watching tape on you all week because of what I did in camp and all of that. He said, we were getting prepped for you. What happened? And I said, Saran came back and it was like I was never even here. And I had that taste in my mouth the whole time. And then it got to a point where I was like, basically, this ain't, nah. I was like, I'm not going to put in this work and then see nothing from it. I was like, nah. And then I told Jim, I said, why don't you just try to trade me, or like, I'm going to walk. I'm like, I'm not going to deal with this. Like, that's how unhappy I was at that time. In hindsight, I wish I hadn't have done that, because just the way that the business works, and even the what things I tell my kids and the kids that I coach, you don't ever walk away from it. If you start it, finish it. So I regret doing that. I should have just stuck it out, got out of my feelings. But I was at such a place because I had put so much work in, and I was like, all right, this is the moment. But when you're talking about pro sports, you don't control that. You have no control over that. Hindsight being 2020, I know that now. I wasn't thinking that back then. You know what I mean? So I thought it was best for me to walk, because it was at a situation where it's like, nah. But I've always said, if it ever gets to a point where I am not enjoying myself, gotta go. So I told Kreiner, I was like, see if somebody wants to trade for me or whatever. And nothing happened. So I ended up going back home. And then I think I ended up going to, that was when I was just like, I ended up going to the CFL. To the CFL after that, up in the Ticats. And then when that was that, and then the situation with the Claymores, then the situation happened with the Ticats. And then after that, I was like, I'm done, because it's not fun anymore. Because, after that happened, then I get up to the Canadian team, and then I get cut from the Canadian team. And then me and my wife are paying for an apartment and a house, and we both unemployed. I'm like, nah. So I had to put the big boy pants on and make a decision. Like, okay, you got your degree, but you can't you got to pick one or the other. And I made that decision. And, I told you the story about the XFL, and that's when I made that decision. I was like, nah, I was like, I gotta get back to life, because I can't keep doing that.
Yeah. And were you, in terms of that decision, I guess that's, this is the dream you've been building towards, to play professional football. When you got to that point, were you quite clear in your mind, or was that something you went back and forth with?
Oh, you go back and forth. And even when you make the decision, you're still going back and forth, because I'm still watching the game. I'm still in shape. I'm like, oh, man, I know I could do better than that. Like, all of those thoughts go into your head. And then there's there's the psychological thing, because then now you're seeing everybody's like, yo, didn't you used to play for the Birds? What you doing now? You're not playing no more. And you don't feel like answering all those questions. You know what I mean? So it is a serious mind game. And it's funny because now, the big buzzword now in professional sports is you talking about mental health. That's a big part of it. Luckily, I was comfortable enough in what I had going on and just in myself. It's like, all right, I made a decision. Yes, it was a hard one, but I had to do what was best for me. I had my degree on time, and this was the other thing. What I always told myself, I was not going to be one of those people where I'm 28, 29 years old, still trying to get my first shot in the league. You know what I mean? Because I remember that first year in the World League, and just talking to other guys from camp and stuff like that, you had guys that were 29, 30 years old, still trying to get on a team, get on the NFL team. So this was like their last ditch effort. And you had the stereotype of, they left college early, they entered the draft early, they didn't graduate, nothing to fall back on. Also, all of these things are running in my head. So I graduated on time. I got my degree. So I do have something to fall back on. And you have a decision to make. Do you want to keep going through all of this work, all of this workouts, all of this money, all of this time, all of this effort, and you still might not get a payoff? Because you're still, like I said before, I'm still not in control. It's always based on somebody else's opinion of me. And the one thing I've learned is, when you're in any type of professional sport, you have to learn how to play the game. And the game ain't fair. That's just the nature of the beast. So I made a decision that even when I was thinking about going to the XFL, I'm like, literally, I was like, do I want to go through all of this work and get down there and it doesn't work out? That's what it comes down to. Do you want to go through all of that again and then maybe you get cut or something like that because somebody else doesn't see your value, or somebody else has a friend, or they're doing a favor, because a lot of times it's not what you know, it's who you know. So you get all of those different things in politics. And I came to the conclusion, I was like, nah, I don't want to deal with that. And like I mentioned with you earlier, the only thing I would do differently is after I decided to step away from football, I wish I would have immediately gone into coaching, because you still have that. You can't just turn it off. You still want to be involved with football. And I wish I immediately got into coaching, so I'd have been able to kind of wean myself down and probably could have explored other opportunities. But I had such a nasty taste in my mouth from the end of the Claymores and the end of the CFL. I was like, I got to step away from it, because I'm not in a good headspace right now, and I don't like what I'm turning into. So I had to step away from it. And everything happens for a reason. You know what I mean? So every step you make is a domino effect of something else coming down later on in life. So, it is what it is. I'm happy with it. I still got championship rings. I've still done, I tell people, I had a cup of coffee in the NFL, but it was my cup of coffee. And I've still done more than the top 1% of athletes in the world. I'm good. And I got a chance to travel the world. Been to Tokyo, been to Scotland, been to all of those countries. So I have no regrets. So I've done more than most.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just something you said there, Marcus, obviously about how almost that kind of purpose of when something's no longer serving you. Obviously that's kind of your point to then give it up. And I think it's a real judge of character. I mean, I never played professional sport, but for some background on me, my degree is in musical theatre, and I came to a point of acting and performing was no longer serving, as it's quite similar in the sense of you're being judged constantly, you have those kind of implications put on you. And I'm just really interested to know, obviously, kind of what you do now. Is there, when you're obviously kind of doing something with maybe kids or anything, is there anything you take from that and really instill in them now of being able to say when something is no longer is serving you, even for your children or your grandchildren at all?
Yeah, it's you always get lessons from the sports that you play, being in a team concept, understand what it takes. And we were talking earlier, understanding what you can learn from loss. Everything is not going to go your way. You got to work through it. Whatever your hand is, whatever hand you are dealt, you have to play that hand. And it's up to you to play that hand the best of your abilities. Sometimes you can exchange cards and make a better hand. Sometimes you can't. So what I try to tell people, even when I coached Little League football for 10 years, and now, a couple of the kids that I coached are playing in the NFL. So even that has come full circle. You know what I mean? So just being able to, what I try to tell people is, every situation you come to, you can only make a mistake one time. And what I mean by that is, when you make a mistake, that means you didn't have all of the information. So you took what you had and you gave it your best guess. You took an educated guess. You're only in those situations really one time. If you find yourself in that situation again, that means you're walking in with your eyes open. That way, you're making a choice. You made a decision to do A, B, or C. And whatever you're going to do, live with it. Make the best decision that you can make, and then you go full tilt. If it don't work out, it don't work out. And then you rinse and repeat. But like we were talking earlier, a lot of people do not know how to handle loss. They don't know how to handle if things aren't going your way. What do you do? If whatever the situation is, a job, a sport, in school, or whatever, it's not going to go your way. So, one of the things I like to say is, now what? Somebody's not supposed to do that. Okay, but they did. Now what? You didn't get a chance to get a 10-year career in the NFL. Now what? So what are you going to do? And you can't stand still worrying about woulda, coulda, shoulda. You just got to keep pressing forward. I had the opportunity to coach kids, and you see the same lessons regardless of what you're doing. You know, you go through that heartache and that frustration at the pro level, and you know what? I'm going through heartache and frustration, dealing with crazy parents and stuff like that. So it's the same thing. It just manifests in different form. You know what I mean? I stopped coaching kids because I kept getting into it with parents for stuff that I didn't even do. You know what I mean? So, and even that got to a point where I'm like, all right, this is not fun anymore. I'm out here for the kids and I got to deal with the parents and their unrealistic expectations, you know, because everybody wants their kid to be the next Michael Jordan or, you know, whoever. And the reality is they're not. And parents don't want to hear that. So I ended up dealing with the parents more than I was dealing with the kids. And I was like, I got to stop. I had a couple situations happen and my wife was like, yeah, that's not good. You know what I mean? So, and I ended up stepping away. So, and now, you know, I do my graphic design. I have a creative outlet. I've always been a creative person. I'm doing my podcast. That's getting some ground and some footing. And I'm just doing that. I've been working for the company I work for. I do graphic and multimedia design, 3D animations and stuff like that. So I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I get the opportunity to work from home because my wife is a kidney recipient. So she has to work from home because, you know, with COVID and everything, she's immunosuppressed. So she gets the option to work from home. My job lets me work from home. So I have no complaints. I'm making the most out of my situation. The YouTube thing seems to be growing. So I'm doing that more and more. It's all good, man. But you got to make the best of your situation, whatever it is.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you've kind of moved us on to that because you mentioned I guess that point about now what, because as much as you kind of talked about your football career, that isn't the end of the story. And actually, you know, you have gone on, you've used your degree, you've gone into graphic design, and you've still been able to impart your knowledge in terms of coaching and also be part of the Eagles community. So that's one of the things we talked about a little bit before we came on air. Was around, I guess, that family culture at the Eagles. You're part of the Legends community that they have. So I don't know if you want to just tell us a little bit about that and your ongoing connection with the team.
Yeah, they have a lot of functions during the year for alumni. There's always an alumni game during preseason that I take part in. And then there's some events prior to the game that like get-togethers at local bars and stuff like that. Every now and then, one of my buddies will call me and like, "Hey, we got a promotion, or we're going to be giving toys to kids, or something like that, and you want to come and sign autographs for a couple hours." And every now and then that'll pop up because, like I said, I'm not a big name. There's only been a few times that I can remember where somebody on the street saw me and was like, "Hey, you used to play for the Eagles, didn't you?" You know, different things like that. I remember coming back from Scotland, and we were going through the Philadelphia airport, and this guy sees me, and he was like, "Hey, Markus Thomas, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "You used to play with the Eagles, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And this is what got me. He goes, "You did the computer stuff, right?" I was like, "Yo, what?" He remembered some news article they did on me because I did a thing about life after football and how I was in a 3D animation and stuff like that. They did that my rookie year, and he remembered. So, you know, that was my claim to fame on the streets, man. But just you know, making the most of the situations you're in, man, and keeping it moving. That's all you can do.
Yeah, and I think maybe one of the things I just want to touch on just before we wrap up is, I guess, that you know, we talked about the Eagles family, but actually the importance of the family as a whole. So you mentioned your wife travelled around with you and just been such a big supporter in your career. She came out to Scotland and then actually went with you to Canada. And when that opportunity came up to potentially go to the XFL, she was very much supporting you in that. So I guess I don't know if you want to give a shout out to Mrs. Thomas and all this.
Yeah. Kathy Thomas, she was right there with me. And she understood what I was doing, and she gave me the space to make the decision. You know what I mean? It was never, well, you got to come home or you got to do this and you got to do that. I remember back to that time I was sitting in the parking lot debating whether I wanted to go to the XFL. I was on the phone with her, and literally she was like, if you want to do it, I will support you. Get it out of your system, whatever you want to do. Make the decision. So I always had that support. You know what I mean? That was always there. Like when we got married, the only thing I would do is like, okay, my check's in the bank account. Whatever you got to do for the wedding. Like she planned the wedding on her own. I flew home, got married, and flew back. She did everything else. So, you know, she holds it down like that. So, you know, Kathy Thomas is the #1 coach in my book. You know, it takes a lot. Everybody can't do that, man. Everybody can't do that. It is not, well, now, you know, you see a lot of stuff with social media and stuff like that, and everybody thinks that being a player's wife is, a lot of times it's not all it's cracked up to be. And everybody just wants everybody wants the limelight. But that is a very nuanced conversation that a lot of people don't really want to have, because they like being up there, but they don't understand the competition that's always there. Everybody's always looking at you. Now, you know, everybody sees you and they're judging everything you do. A lot of people can't really handle that. So.
No, I think it's been a really great conversation. I guess really appreciate your candor as well, because I think it's obviously it's excellent to talk about the highlights and the successes in the career, but you know there's a lot of I guess stark realities and business decisions that come in the life of being a footballer, and I think you know it's been great to have you on with us, Marcus, just to share all of that. And I think, like you say, some of the, I guess, the themes of resilience and the importance of confidence and just being able to trust in yourself to make decisions at those key points in your career. I think it's been really, I guess, illuminating to hear all of that, and really grateful for you making time for us this evening.
Hey, my pleasure, man. Like I said, always willing to talk some Claymore's talk. And if you ever get a chance, if you're not busy, do me a favor and send me a case of Irn Bru.
Easy. Yeah, for sure. We'll send it in the post. It's fine. I only know one place in the States where you can get Irn Bru, and that's like a British shop and just outside of Orlando. So I mean, if you ever find yourself down there,
I found some Irn Bru. It was I think it was like an old liquor store in Jersey, and I bought it. And it was flat.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
I was hot. I was so upset about that. I was looking forward to that. But yeah, man, that was my drink of choice in Scotland.
Oh,
love Irn Bru. That's funny.
One last thing, maybe just
sure.
Marcus obviously mentioned your podcast, but just maybe to give a shout out. Obviously, Pro Fan Talk is available on YouTube. Anywhere else that people can follow you?
You know what? I keep it on YouTube. YouTube is the easiest platform to work with. So just check out Pro Fan Talk on YouTube. I'm usually streaming 2 or 3 times a week. I'm usually producing. If I'm not live streaming, I'm uploading something that I've created. Right now, there's a lot of talk with the Philadelphia Eagles and everything that's going on with that. So it's funny. I've been doing Eagles content, but then I started doing the WNBA stuff, and it took off. So it's funny. I'm a former Philadelphia Eagle talking about the Philadelphia Eagles and other NFL content, but my WNBA content is what took off. It's crazy how that stuff works, but I enjoy it. So yeah, check me out, Pro Fan Talk. Don't be a stranger. Subscribe. Jump in my live chat, man. Tell me you're from Scotland, man. We can chop it up.
Sounds great. Well, really grateful for having you on this evening, Marcus.
My pleasure.
Very grateful. Thanks for your time. Thanks, Sarah, for co-piloting this evening, and we'll speak to you all soon.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.